Okay, today's daf is in Masechta Nazir Daf Ches. So I'm going to point out to you, I saw a nice little story from Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. A father came to him with his little boy who was in the yeshiva, and the boy, Nebuch, suffered from a condition that his hair was falling out, and the other kids in the class were making fun of him. So Reb Chaim looked at the boy and then he said, I believe that your neshama in a previous lifetime was a Nazir, and you were in a previous lifetime were a Nazir can't rip one hair out. He can't even comb his hair. And you weren't careful and you were ripping hairs out, although you were a Nazir. So he suggested to the boy to study Masechta Nazir. And then the problem will stop. And that's what the story ends, that the father and son sat down and learned Masechta Nazir, and the boy's hair stopped falling out, and the condition disappeared. So I love that story. Anyway. Okay, so let us begin the Daf Ches. And here we are in Daf Ches. Okay, so we know that a person, there's basically, let's just review the rules over here. If a person says, Hareini Nazir, I just want to be a Nazir, so then you're just a Nazir for 30 days. That's it. You have to keep the rules of 30 days of Naziris. Again, you can't drink wine, you can't go to funerals, Matam Mesim, and you can't cut your hair. So now, and then you have to bring karbonis. At the end of the 30 days, you bring oila chatas shlamim. Fine. Now, if a person says, I want to be a Nazir for the rest of my life, and we find that in Tanakh, Avshalom, the son of David HaMelech, was a Nazir for the rest of his life. So then, you never finished your Naziris. However, once in 12 months, you're allowed to take a haircut, a little bit of a haircut. And when you do, you bring karbonis, but you're a Nazir for the rest of your life. Here, we're going to have let's say a person says, I want to be a Nazir for 100 years. Okay, I want to say that case. Then you have to wait till the 100 years are up, because since you gave yourself a finite amount of time, if you said you want to be a Nazir for 20 years, so then you can't, you have no leniencies to cut your hair every now and then, once in 12 months. You have to keep it for the amount of time that you specified. So look at this case in the Mishnah. Hareini Nazir, a person says, I'm a Nazir, kis'ar roishi, like the amount of hair in my head. Let's assume that in a human head, there's about 100,000 hairs, okay? So he wants to be a Nazir like the amount of hair that's on my head. So what the Mishnah is going to say is that the Tanakama holds, what you meant is that you want to take consecutive Naziris. In other words, every 30 days, there should be a Nazir. So that means every 30 days, you must bring karbonis. It's not like a choice. You have to bring karbonis and then start a new Naziris every 30 days, because every hair is a separate entity, right? And there's an infinite amount. So that for the rest of your life, every 30 days, you're going to have to go to the Beis HaMikdash and bring your karbonis. Hi, Louis, we just began. On the Mishnah on Daf Ches. Louis, we just began. So again, Hareini Nazir, a person says, I want to be a Nazir. Kis'ar roishi, like the amount of hair that's on my head. V'chafa'ar aretz. Or he says, I want to be a Nazir, like the amount of grains of sand, of dust on the ground. U'kachal hayam, with the sand by the beach. Whatever. So they're individual pieces. Harezen Nazir olam. What that means, he's a Nazir forever. That means he's consecutively Nazir. And therefore, every 30 days, he takes a haircut every 30 days, and he has to bring karbonos every 30 days. And he can't like delay it. He has to do it every 30 days. So he probably lives, somewhere next to the Beis HaMikdash in the old city. And then every 30 days is bring the karbonos, and then he starts to count again. So that's a consecutive Naziris every 30 days for the rest of his life. Rebbe says, he doesn't take a haircut once in every 30 days. He's a Nazir forever. In other words, he's like a lifetime Nazir. Let's assume he can never take a haircut. That's what he means. He's a lifetime Nazir, and he can never take a haircut for the rest of his life. What would be a case where I would agree to the Tanakama that says Rebbe? I would agree to the Tanakama that you can be consecutive Naziris every 30 days, If you would say Haima, you say the same thing, but instead of saying Hareini Nazir singular, you say Hare Olai. Here's the word, keyword Nazirus. He said, I want to be many Nazirs. Kisar Roishi, like the hair of my head. So you want to be 100,000 times 30, right? The amount of hair on your head. Kafar Aretz, Kalayan. So the key word is Nazirus. That changes it to consecutive Nazirus of 30 days. Now the Mishnah continues with a unexplained part of the Mishnah. A Mishnah says, let's say we go like the Tanakama. That's what the Gemara is going to originally think, that this part of the Mishnah goes according to Tanakama. Person says, Hareini Nazir, I'm a Nazir, Maloi Habayis, whatever you can fit into this house. Let's say in a house, or Maloi HaKupa, whatever you can fit into this kupa is a basket. Now let's take a basket. You could fit, like 30 cucumbers in the basket, right? Or you could fit one watermelon in the basket, or you can fit millions of mustard, thousands of mustard seeds. So that he said, I want to be a Nazir for the amount that you can fill into this basket. So it's an undefined amount. So Beit can I say, we will ask him a question. If he says that I made one big Naziris, then Nazir Lamed Yom, then you're Nazir 30 days, because he probably meant that I'm going to be a Nazir as much as you can fit one big watermelon in this basket. And what he meant to say is that Naziris is so difficult for me as a big watermelon that I have to carry around, or something like that. So you're Nazir only one time. Vim Omar, but if he says Stam Nazarti, I didn't think about it. I left it up to Chachamim to figure out what I meant. And that's how he meant. So then, Royin Esakupa Ki'ilihi Malaya Chardol, we see that as if the basket is full of little mustard seeds, and he meant it like the hair on his head. Every 30 days, he's in brand new Nazir. The Nazir Kol Yomav, and he's a Nazir for the rest of his life. And presumably, every 30 days, he's a Nazir, and he has to take a haircut like the first case in the Mishnah, when he says Kisa'ar Reishi. The only difference is that this part of the Mishnah says Nazir Olam, and this part says Nazir Kol Yomav. Well, but this is a really undefined part of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara Mishnah comes into another point. Hareini Nazir Mikan Ad Mokum Ploini. A person is, let's say, on the road, and he says, I'm a Nazir from now till I reach that place. Let's say he's traveling to China, and it takes him. Let's say he's traveling to Australia. It takes him 30 hours by plane, right? So he says, I'm a Nazir for the amount of time it takes me to get from New York to Australia. Then we estimate how many days does it take from him to go from this place to the place of his destination? In Pachas Malamed Yom, if it's less than 30 days, Nazir Lamed Yom. You have to be a Nazir for 30 days, because even if it took you 15 days to get there, and you're saying, I want to be a Nazir for the amount of days it takes me to get to that place, well, there's no such a thing of a Nazir for less than 30 days. So you automatically have 30 days. Vim Lav, let's say it's not that way. Let's say it takes you 40 days to get there. Nazir Kaminyan Hayamim, then you're Nazir, one long Naziris for 40 days. Now, because here it's a finite number. Let's say it's 40 days to get there. Right? And it's a unit. It's a unit of amount of time to go from point A to point B. Therefore, it's one long Naziris of 40 days. Unlike when you look at your hair on your head, right? Every point, every hair is another entity. And therefore, when a person says, Nazir Roishi, he means I want consecutive Naziris. Each hair should be counted as a 30-day Naziris. And there's 100,000 of them. So every 30 days for the rest of his life, he's a Nazir. But when you said, Hareini Nazir, from the amount of time it takes me to travel from point A to point B, you're basically saying, this is a finite amount of number. It's a unit. So you're basically saying, I want to be a long Nazir for the amount of time it takes me to go from point A to point B. And therefore, if it takes you 40 days, then you're a Nazir for 40 days. You're not a 40 times 30 Nazir, but you're just a Nazir for 40 days. Case number 3, Hareini Nazir keminyan yemoy sachama. Person says, I want to be a Nazir like the amount of the solar year. Now, let's say he would say without the word minyan. without the word count. He just said, I'm a Nazir for the solar year. So then he would be a Nazir for 360, according to the Chachamim. According to the Chachamim, he's saying Kaminyan Yemoy Sechama. So you would be one long Nazir for 365 days. That makes sense. You're saying, I want to be a Nazir like the solar year. You're meaning you want to be a Nazir for 365 days, one long one. But here you add it to the days of Kaminyan, to the amount of the days of the summer, of the days of the solar year. So you want to be 365 Naziris. So you basically are saying, for every 30 days, I want to count another Nazir 365 times. So therefore, because you added the word minyan, Moine Naziris Kaminyan Moisachama, you count the amount of Naziris as 365 Naziris, and that's about 30 years. For 30 years, every 30 days, you're counting, you're making a Nazir for yourself. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, there was an exact story like that. Somebody who said, I'm a Nazir Kaminyan Moisachama, like the amount of days in the solar year. So Kivin Shehishlim, as soon as he finished the 30 years, he was a 30-year Nazir, every 30 days, going to the Beis Hamikdash, getting his hair cut, then bringing the karbanos. When he finished his at the end of the 30 year doing this, mace, he died. So maybe he was trying to be Misakin and Aveira or something, and that's why he took it upon himself. And as soon as the tikkun happened, there's no longer a reason for him to be on planet Earth. So he died. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Now, the Gemara says like this. We said in the Mishnah, the middle case of the Mishnah, that if he said, Hareinu Nazir, what you can fill into the basket, so we see as if the basket is full with mustard seeds, and therefore he's a Nazir every 30 days for the rest of his life. So the Gemara doesn't understand that. We see as if the basket is full of mustard, and therefore he's a Nazir for the rest of his life. Every 30 days, it's like saying I'm Nazir the amount of hair on my head. So every 30 days he's another Nazir. So the Mamai, why do we interpret it as so severely? Remember, he didn't say, I want to be a Nazir, like how many mustard seeds you could put into the basket. He just left it open-ended to the Chachamim to decide. And he said, I want to be a Nazir, the amount of Naziris that you could fit something in this basket. So then the question is, let us view the basket as if it's full of let's say watermelon, udluim, gourds, the tabulate the kanta, and then it should be able to finish it. Let's say you could put 3 watermelons in there, 3 melons in there, in this basket, or 10 big cucumbers. So then after 10 consecutive Naziris of 30 days, it ends. Why do we tighten it up so severely for him? So the answer is that we're not sure what he meant. And therefore, there's a rule, there's a Tana that holds when you're in doubt, when it comes to Naziris, you go strict. Amar Chizkiya. But Chizkiya explained, the reason why we're going strict, because it's a known machlekes, and our Mishnah goes according to Rab Shimon. The Amar, who said, by Naziris, a person would allow himself to interpret what he meant to say, even though it's more strict than if we know for sure. The Tanya we learned in a Brisa. Rab Hareini Nazir, if a person says, I want to be a Nazir, al manash ye bekrize me'akor. Let's say he says, I'm waiting Nazir. You remember they used to, in the carnivals, you have to guess how many bubble gums are in the machine. So I was saying, in a similar situation, a person says, I'm a Nazir. If I can tell you that in this big pile of wheat, I can guesstimate that there's 100 kur, an amount. And then they wanted to measure to see if he's correct. And they found out that the pile of wheat is all stolen. So we don't know if he's a Nazir. He depended his Naziris if his estimation of the pile was correct. So Rab Shimon says he's a Nazir. To speak Naziris lahachmid, you always go strict. You don't know. If we know for sure he got it wrong, then he's not a Nazir. But there's a possibility that he got it right, and therefore we go strict. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Matir shesveik naziris lehelka. Rabbi Huda says, unless you know for sure that there's 100 kur in this pile, then he would be a nazir. But since the whole pile got stolen or lost, we don't know which pile it was. So then you don't know if he's a nazir. So therefore, he's not a nazir. So we see Reb Shimon has this rule that if you're in doubt with naziris, you go strict. So here also, if you have a doubt what to put into the basket to determine what he meant, you have to go strict. And we don't say that he meant cucumbers or melons in the basket. You say he meant mustard seed. Okay. Now, it's also very interesting because it's more strict over here because we don't know if he means mustard seeds. There is no end to it, because if he said he meant cucumbers, right? So if you say he meant cucumbers, then after 10 naziris, then you can end it. But here we're going to interpret he meant strict. It goes on forever. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Afilu temer Rabbi Yehuda." Our Mishnah that goes strict, and we see as if there's mustard seeds in the basket, goes even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Normally, Rabbi Yehuda goes lenient when it comes to a doubt of naziris, but in our case, he'll agree you go strict. Also, in the case over there where he's guesstimating what's in the pile, so there, like nachas like naziris, the man himself, you don't see that he wants to be a nazir, because he's saying only if there's in this pile 100 kur, then I want to be a nazir. So therefore, once we don't know for sure, we go lenient, and you say you're not a nazir. Hach over here, nachas le naziris, he wants to be a nazir. No, so it's now up to our interpretation what he meant. Did he mean the amount of naziris of amount of cucumbers you can fit in the basket, or the mustard seeds you can fit in the basket? So how are we going to remove it from him? He wants to be a nazir. Therefore, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you go strict. So the Gemara says, "Amai loy." Why would Rabbi Yehuda say you don't go strict? You don't go lenient over here? Let's see the basket. Like it's full of melons or cucumbers. And then you can end it. Ger says loy nazir to the Kabbalah. He didn't want to be a nazir for so long. You see, you don't see definitively that he wants to be a nazir for the rest of his life. Maybe he only wanted to be a nazir up to the amount of cucumbers you could fit into this basket. Let's say 10 cucumbers, 10 consecutive times of 30. But you don't see that he wants to be a nazir for the rest of his life. So how can you say that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you would go, Rabbi Yehuda normally goes lenient, will go strict in our case? In our case, why would he go strict? We don't know for sure he wants to be a nazir that for the rest of his life. So the Gemara backpedals, and we go to Chesam and Beis, that Rabbi Yehuda Savala Karebi. In other words, a beautiful interpretation. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda that if you have in doubt, you go lenient. The Mishnah that says that you see it as full of mustard seeds, don't interpret it like the Chachamim that you're consecutive naziris that you're a consecutive nazir every 30 days. Don't view it like the Rabbanan explaining the Mishnah, you're a mustard seed, every 30 days you're a nazir. But rather interpret it like Rebbe would interpret that. When you say, I'm a nazir like the hair on my head, you're one big nazir for the rest of your life. You're not every 30 days. So also, you're one big naziris for the rest of your life. And that is the lenient way to go. Because if you say that you're a nazir for, let's say, if you would say that if you would say that you're a consecutive nazir, right? Or you're a nazir for let's say 30 cucumbers, whatever you can put into the basket, and after 30 days you could bring your karbanis. It could be that you're bringing chulin ba'azara. So that is you wouldn't go say you're not a nazir, because that could possibly bring a big avera by you bringing karbonis that you're not supposed to bring karbonis at that time, because maybe you meant that you want to be a big nazir for the rest of your life, as like the amount of mustard seeds, a million days nazir. So therefore the lenient way to go is by saying that you meant mustard seeds. So you don't have to bring karbonos every 30 days. You never have to bring karbonos. You're just one big, long Naziris for the rest of your lifetime. The Tnan, and that is the opinion of Rebbe. Rebbe says, when a person says, I want to be a Nazir for the amount of hair on my head, it doesn't mean that he's every 30 days he's a Nazir. He's one big Nazir for the rest of his life. That is not called taking a haircut every 30 days. The only time you take a haircut for every 30 days, if you say Harei Alai Naziris, if you want, you say plural, I want many Naziris, then Rebbe would agree that every 30 days you're Nazir. But if you don't say that word Naziris, you say Hareini Nazir, like whatever you can fit into this basket, so then Rebbe holds that that is one big Nazir. You're one big Nazir for the rest of your life. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, who is the author of that part of the Mishnah, will say that the lenient way, the more sense way to go is to say that you're a Nazir for the rest of your life and you never bring karbonos. Because if you go and say that you're a Nazir only a little bit, like the amount of cucumbers you could fit in, or amount of melons that you can fit into the basket, well, then you're going to bring karbonos. And you're probably going to bring karbonos that maybe you're not supposed to bring. So therefore, the better way to look at it is that you're one big Nazir for the rest of your life, and you never have to bring a Nazir. So that's why we're trying to push that part of the Mishnah will go even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that Safek Naziris you go lenient, but this part of the Mishnah goes according to Rebbe. So there must be that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe. So the Gemara says, the Gemara clarifies just 2 points on this. Rabbi Yehuda misava la Rebbe. Does Rabbi Yehuda actually hold like Rebbe when you say that if you're an amount of time, you're never a Nazir, you're never a Nazir for consecutive times, you're only a Nazir one long period of time? Well, that's not true. But now we learned in the Mishnah, Hareini Nazir, you said Nazir, Keminya Moisachama, as the amount of the solar year. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Maisahaya, the Kivin Shehishla Mace, the person did it every 30 days, he was a Nazir, and at the end of the 365 times 30, he died. After he kept keeping 365 separate Naziris, he died. And that's what he means. Yamar Bishlam Naziris called Makabale, that Rabbi Yehuda meant to say his story was that every 30 days he was a Nazir. Hainu Tama, that's what it means. Came into Hishlam when he finished the 365 Nazir, the 365th time that he was Nazir, Mace, he died. Eli Amr, if you want to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi, Chadid Naziris Kibal Alave, he accepted upon himself one long Naziris, Mihava Shlama Klal, that the language of he completed doesn't make sense. Because if it's one Nazir, you say you ended it, but you don't say you mashlim. Mashlim is the word mashlim is when there's different numbers.
Yeah, finish it up.
That's right. You're finishing it up. And one more point. V'oid misavala karebi. Does Rabbi Yehuda hold like Rebbe? Well, Tanina, we learned in another brisa. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hareini Nazir minyan helkete kayetz. I want to be a Nazir on the amount of roads that are in my fig. Where they dry the figs, they made little pathways so you could walk around. So he says, I want to be a Nazir, although how many pathways there are in this fig drying place. Or minyan shibali shmita, or the amount of little pathways in my field, which I made pathways to people to walk into my field during Shemitah. Basically, it's a finite number. But he said minyan, he said Nazir. Moinen Naziris, Communion Helkate, Kayetz, or Communion Shabbat Shemitah. So you count how many roads there are, and every road is 1 30-day Shemitah. 1 30-day Shemitah. So it's not like Rebbe, because Rebbe would hold in that case, it's one long Naziris. Let's say you have 40 little pathways, you'll be one long Nazir of 40 days, not 40 different Nazirises. So Rebbe and Rabbi Yehuda are not the same. And
every month you have to bring a carbon, no?
Yeah, every month you have to bring a carbon. That's what he says. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to. According to Rebbe, not. So
no.
The answer is Minyan Shani. If you say minyan, if you say the amount of the word minyan, then you count 30 days as another Nazir. So the Gemara says, would Rebbe agree to that? Rebbe minyan. Would Rebbe agree to the word minyan? That if you add the word minyan, you're consecutive different Naziris. But Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Hareini Nazir keminyan yemaisachama. He says, I want to be a Nazir at the amount of the solar year. Moinin Naziris keminyan yemaisachama. You count how many 365 different Naziris. Kimei Levuna. If you want to be in the amount of the lunar year, Moinin Kimei Levuna, 354 Naziris. But here's the point. Rabbi Oimer, no. Even if you said Keminyan Yemoisachama, you're just one long Nazir of 365 days. If you said Yemei Levona, you're just one long Naziris of 354 days. Achi Yoim Naziris alai Keminyan Yemoisachama, Keminyan Yemoislevona. That means until you say the word Minya, the word Naziris, then if you said many Naziris, then it's different. You count it as different amounts. 365 different Naziris, so 354. But if you say Hareini Nazir, it means that if you say the word Nazir, you mean only one Nazir. So answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Savala Kavase Bechada Upalagle Bechada. Rabbi Yehuda is his own different opinion. He agrees with Rabbi and he argues with Rabbi. What does it mean? Savala Kavase Bechada. He holds like Rabbi in one way. Naziris Kibal Alavi. That means that if a person says Hareini Nazir Kesaaris Roishi, if you say it means one big Naziris, that's what it means. You're taking one big Naziris. If you say amount of hair on my head, Rabbi Yehuda would agree to Rabbi that it means one big Naziris. And there's Upalagale Bechada, but he would argue on Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda would make a difference. If you use the word minyan, then you break it up. Rabbi would not make a difference if you use mina or minyan. It's always one big long Naziris. So to review, and then we'll just finish up the parak. To review is that there are three opinions in the Mishnayos. The one opinion is the Chachamim. If a person says, I want to be a Nazir to the amount of hair on my head, then he's a Nazir every 30 days for the rest of his life. According to the Chachamim, if you say, I want to be a Nazir for the solar year, that means you're a Nazir for 365 days. But if he says, I want to be a Nazir to the amount of days in the solar year, that means you're a Nazir 365 times every 30 days. That's the Chachamim. Rabbi holds you don't make a difference no matter what. You're always one long Nazir. The only time you become a many Naziris, if you say Hareini Naziris, I am a many Naziris. If you say explicitly a many Naziris, then you're separate Naziris. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have he's like Rabbi, that normally when you say Sa'er Roishi, you're one long Naziris. But when it comes to the solar year, if you add the word keminyan, even if you said Hareini Nazir, but you said Hareini Nazir keminyan, the amount of days of the solar year, Rabbi Yehuda would disagree. You're every 30, every day, every 30.
Every month he counts him and he has to bring a korban.
That's right. That's it. Four Tanur Rabbanans, and then we'll end. 2 minutes. Tanur Rabbanan, Hareini Nazir kol yemei chayai. A man says, Ich bin a Nazir for the rest of my life. Or I want to be Nazir forever. So Hareini Nazir oilam. Then he's a Nazir forever, which means, as we explained, he's like a Nazir for the rest of his life, but not that every 30 days he brings a korban, but once every 12 months, if he wants to take a haircut, he's like Avshalom. You can take a haircut every year. But what happens? He says, Afila me'ashana, Afila elef shanim. If he says, I want to be a Nazir for 100 years or 1,000 years, Ein zen Nazir oilam. That's not like a Nazir oilam. Ela Nazir la oilam. He's a Nazir forever. In other words, that we don't allow him to take haircuts at all. He has to wait the 100 years before the Naziris ends. And then because since he gave a limit to when the Naziris should end, Even if he said the Nazir should end 100 years, well, he's not going to live more than 100 years from the time he said that. Or he says he's not going to live 1,000 years, but since he gave a number when he wants the Naziris to end, so we don't give him the leniencies to take a haircut. No leniencies. He has to go the 100 years or the 1,000 years, and then the Naziris ends. Nu Gemara. Hareini Nazir. He says, I'm a Nazir. So that's 30 days. But then he says, Va'achas, and one more Nazir. So Moine Shtayim. Then he counted as 2. V'oid. Let's say he says, Hareini Nazir Va'achas V'oid, and I want to be another Nazir. Moine Sholosh. He count 3 Naziris. Vishuv, if he said the word Vishuv again, so Moina Arba, then he's 4. So a man says, Hareini Nazir Va'achas V'oid Vishuv. That means he's counting, he wants to be 4 Nazirs. So the Gemara says Pshita. That means for every 30 days, 4 times, he's a Nazir. So now the Gemara asks Pshita, isn't that obvious? So no, the Gemara says, no, Ma'ud the same, I would have thought Vishuv, when he says Vishuv, by the 4th time, he says, I want to do it again. He's trying to say is, I want to have 3 more Nazirs. So Hikuli B'Havelei Shis. So that last statement that he said should say, require him to have 3 more, like the ones he said prior. So he said, I want to be Nazir, Achas, and then V'oid. So by saying those 3, then he has 3 Naziris. And then he says Veshuv, I would have thought he meant, I wanted to do that number 3 again. Shis. And he wants to be a Nazir 6 times. No, we interpret it as he meant to say that he only wants to be a Nazir 4 times. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hareini Nazir. A person says, I want to be a Nazir. Sumchus explained. Even if he said it in Greek, he said hein. If he says I want to be Nazir, hein means achas. Digon, like diagonal, which is a 2. He means 2. Shtayim, he's going to be 2 Naziris. If he says Hareini Nazir trigoin, which is the Greek way of saying like triangle, it's the Greek way of saying 3. Shalosh. Tetragoin. If he says, I want to be a Nazir for tetragoin, it's another Greek word of the number 4, Arba. Pentagon, Chamish, that it means to be 5 times a Nazir. Basically, what he's saying is, the way the Taisus interprets is that since he says the numbers in the Greek language, even if he doesn't understand what he's saying in the Greek language, we know what these numbers mean in Greek, and therefore we interpret it for him as he meant all these numbers. So if he said pentagon, he means 5 times, tetragon 4, and digon shtayim, trigon is sholish in Greek. Because the reason why we interpret it is because Chazal used this Greek terminology, and since Chachamim used these numbers in Greek, we find in brises that use the Greek language. So then, if he says it, Greek will interpret it for him, even though he doesn't understand it. But if he says it, the numbers in Hungarian, and he doesn't speak Hungarian, then he didn't accept upon himself a Nazir. He has to verstehen. He has to understand what he's trying to say. Parabonan, that's why this brisa comes in. Bias ogel, if you have a round house, this brisa is talking about nige batim. The Torah talks about when you have a neger in your house, sometimes you have to knock the whole house down, but only if you have a 4-cornered house. Bais ogel, if this person has a round house, digan, or a house with 2 angles. Trigan, if it's a house on a triangle, like 3 angles. Pentagon, it's a 5-angle building, like the Pentagon. There's no nigebatim in that house. But tetragon, if it's 4, mitama b'negoim, that's when the Torah talks about a neged could happen in the house. It has to be a 4-cornered house. My tama, what's the reason? Lamatahu oimer, it says kir. Normally, it should say the word kir, kiros, and it says kiros. Lamalu oimer kir, and then it says kiros. So it says twice the word kiros, meaning 2 walls, and it didn't have to say that. It could have said here. Harekan Arba, therefore we know when it comes to Nigi Batim, you have to have 4 walls, not 3, 2, or 5. So therefore, you see Chachamim use the word to describe numbers in the Greek language. Greek somehow intermingled with the Chachamim, and therefore, if someone accepts upon himself Naziris in the Greek numbers, and even if he doesn't understand it, he's still considered the Nazir, the amount of times in that number, the way it is interpreted in Greek. Hadron Allah called Knuye, and we ended Bez Hashem this parak in Masechta Nazir.